Welcome back to the Deep Dive, everyone. Today we're going way back. We're talking about a battle, a really significant battle, actually, that you may have never even heard of, the Battle of Adwa. And I'm joined by expert's name again to deep dive into it with us.
It's great to be back, and you're right, the Battle of Adwa doesn't get nearly enough attention. It was a monumental clash in 1896 that really underscores the whole idea of African resistance during the Scramble for Africa, a time when European powers were basically taking whatever they wanted.
Yeah, it's easy to forget just how pervasive that mindset was back then, you know? Like, European powers genuinely believed they were in the right to redraw the map of Africa however they pleased.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
They saw it as their duty, almost, to bring civilization to the continent. It was this very paternalistic and honestly racist viewpoint that fueled their whole imperial project.
Right, like they were doing the rest of the world a favor. And sadly, a lot of nations just couldn't stand up to the military might of these European powers. But Ethiopia, under the leadership of Menelik II, well, they decided to draw a line in the sand. So how did Ethiopia manage to resist where so many others had failed? I mean, we're talking about taking on global superpowers here.
Well, one of the most important things Menelik II did was unify his nation. You see, Ethiopia, like many parts of Africa at the time, was dealing with its own internal divisions, conflicts between different regions and ethnicities. But Menelik II, he had this incredible ability to bring people together to focus their energy on a common enemy.
He was a pretty unifying figure then, at least when it came to facing down an external threat.
Exactly. And it's this unity, this shared sense of purpose that formed the bedrock of Ethiopian resistance. But of course, unity alone wasn't enough. They also needed the firepower to match the modern European armies.
Yeah, you can't fight off an invasion with good vibes alone. They needed actual weapons. So how did they manage to equip themselves?
Menelik II was a brilliant strategist, both militarily and politically. He knew that to beat the Europeans at their own game, he needed their weapons. So he played the European powers against each other, made deals, exploited rivalries, and ultimately managed to acquire a surprisingly large cache of modern weapons.
So he was playing this dangerous game, arming up, using the very weapons his enemies thought would give them the upper hand.
Oh, absolutely. It was a huge gamble. But Menelik II, he was a calculated risk taker. And it wasn't just about the weapons themselves. He also understood that battles aren't just won on battlefields.
Yeah, there's a whole psychological aspect to warfare, right? Like demoralizing your enemy, controlling the narrative.
Exactly. And Menelik II was a master of that. He knew that European perceptions of Africa were shaped by their own biases, by this idea of Africans as being, less civilized, less sophisticated. So he actively worked to change that narrative.
How do you do that? I mean, were there PR firms back then? Social media influencers?
Well, not quite. But Menelik II, he cultivated relationships with European journalists, invited them to Ethiopia, let them see the reality of his nation, its culture, its history.
And they're putting on a show, a good one, I hope.
He was. He was showcasing Ethiopian diplomacy, their legal systems, their art. He even exchanged letters with Queen Victoria of England, emphasizing that he was a leader on par with any European monarch.
Dang, that's playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers. But eventually, all that careful maneuvering had to lead somewhere, and it led to the battlefield itself, to Adwa. So tell me, what went down when these two forces finally met?
Well, the Italians, they were pretty confident, I'd say. They marched into Adwa with their shiny new rifles, expecting a quick and decisive victory.
Overconfidence. Never a good look on anyone. Did they seriously underestimate their opponent that badly?
They did. They completely underestimated the size, the determination, and especially the strategic genius of Menelik II and the Ethiopian forces.
Okay, so this is where all that meticulous planning we talked about earlier really comes into play, right?
Absolutely. You see, the Ethiopians, they had a home turf advantage. They knew the terrain, they knew the weather patterns. They even used their knowledge of local paths and hidden passages to outmaneuver the Italians.
The land itself almost became a weapon in a way.
Exactly. The Italians were completely unprepared for this kind of warfare. They were used to fighting on open battlefields, not in this kind of rugged, mountainous terrain.
And not against an enemy that was so utterly determined to defend their homeland.
Right. The Ethiopian forces were fighting for something far greater than themselves. They were fighting for their families, their land, their very way of life.
And don't forget about the women who played such a pivotal role in this battle.
Oh, absolutely. The History.com article we're using as a source for this deep dive, it highlights the incredible contributions of Ethiopian women. They weren't just providing support from the sidelines, they were on the front lines, fighting, strategizing, tending to the wounded.
That's right. It even mentions that Empress Taitu, Menelik's wife, she actually rode into battle herself.
She did. And she wasn't just there for show, you know. She actively rallied the troops, boosting their morale, showing them that everyone, regardless of gender, was in this fight together.
I mean, that's a powerful image. This wasn't just a battle between armies. It was a fight for the very soul of a nation, and everyone was involved.
Exactly. And when you have that kind of unity, that kind of unwavering commitment, it can tip the scales even against a technologically superior force.
And tip the scales it did. The article says that by the end of the day, the Italian forces were completely routed, leaving behind their weapons and thousands of prisoners.
It was a crushing defeat for Italy, one that sent shockwaves throughout Europe and beyond. It wasn't just a defeat, it was a full-blown humiliation for Italy and for the whole idea of European colonialism. Remember, this was the height of the scramble for Africa.
When European powers thought they were invincible.
Right, exactly. They were used to getting their way, carving up continents like they were splitting a birthday cake. Then along comes Ethiopia, and they completely flipped the script.
They show that European powers can bleed.
Yes, and not just bleed. They can be defeated decisively by an African nation they considered inferior. The ramifications of that were huge.
Yeah, I can imagine the shockwaves going through the halls of power in Europe. Like, wait a minute, what just happened?
Oh, absolutely. It sent a message, a powerful one. Colonial rule isn't inevitable. Resistance is possible.
And it's not just about resisting, it's about winning.
Absolutely. And I think that message, that sense of hope, it resonated far beyond Ethiopia's borders.
Did other anti-colonial movements explicitly reference Adwa? Like, hey, look at Ethiopia, we can do that too.
Well, it's hard to pinpoint direct causal links like that. But what we do know is that Adwa had this profound impact on the psyche of colonized people all over the world.
Like a ripple effect.
Exactly. Suddenly there's this example, this real tangible example of what a united, determined people can accomplish against overwhelming odds.
And that kind of inspiration is invaluable, right? Especially when you're fighting an uphill battle.
Exactly. And it's not just about inspiration. Adwa also forced people to confront the lies, the racist ideologies that underpinned colonialism in the first place.
The idea that Europeans were inherently superior, destined to rule. Adwa just shattered that myth.
Exactly. It exposed the hollowness of those claims, showed that strength, resilience, strategic thinking, all these qualities weren't exclusive to Europe.
So, on top of being a military victory, Adwa was a victory for human dignity, for self-determination.
Absolutely. And it reminds us that history isn't a foregone conclusion written in some book somewhere. It's a constant struggle, a push and pull between different forces, different ideologies.
And sometimes the underdog wins.
And when they do, it can change the course of history.
This has been eye-opening. I'll admit, I'd only vaguely heard of the Battle of Adwa before this. Now I can't believe they don't teach this in schools. It's such a pivotal moment.
It really is. It challenges us to rethink everything we thought we knew about colonialism, about resistance, about power itself.
And that's what makes these deep dives so fascinating. We get to uncover these hidden gems of history, these stories that have been brushed under the rug but deserve to be told and retold.
And remembered. Because the lessons of Adwa, they're timeless. They remind us to question the narratives we're fed, to fight for what we believe in, and to never, ever underestimate the power of the human spirit.
That's a perfect note to end on. Thanks for joining us on this incredible journey into the heart of the Battle of Adwa. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.